All right. So, it has been far too long. So, I barely remember what happened. I did a tiny bit of recapping on the last episode that was aired forever ago. Um, but I've been wanting to play this recently. So, we're going to see if we can't, fingers crossed, finish 999. Not in this sitting. We're probably only going to play like about an hour or so for this sitting. But I do plan on continuing playing this when I have free time. So, that being said, some things are different. Some things may have changed. Um, some voices may change depending on if I can remember them or not, or if I even want to do them. All of these things may change. But with that being said, here we go. Getting back into 999. It doesn't seem reasonable that he would have killed Snake as well. Junpei hadn't really considered that. If Zero had killed Snake, then Zero was on the ship with them. Was Zero still on the ship with them? Junpei wasn't sure, or of course. This is the decision we left the last episode. So, this is the decision we're going to make. I'm going to say they both mean typically the same thing, but if I say of course, then that's either going to lean towards the fact that he's on the ship, or it's going to backlash and say that I know he's on the ship. And if that's the case, how will I know? If Junpei isn't sure, then of course they'll probably do some investigating or more talking about the subject. So I'm going to go with Junpei wasn't sure. He wasn't sure. Hey, I'm just wondering about one thing. Oh, hey, I'm just wondering about one thing. And what's that? How can you be sure that Zero's on this ship? Ace's eyebrows shot up. Really, Junpei? I confess, I'm a little disappointed. Usually you're rather sharp. Isn't it obvious? Obvious? How so? This ship. Huh? Zero said this ship several times when he addressed us. I am Zero, the captain of this ship. The purpose of the game is simple. Leave this ship alive. As you have no doubt surmised, this ship has begun to sink. If he weren't here, he wouldn't say this ship, would he? He'd be saying something like that ship, or the ship. Oh. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Ace's explanation made perfect sense. Junpei felt a little foolish that he hadn't seen it himself. Still, he was left with a question, and it was one of no small importance. If Zero's on the ship, where is he? Suddenly, everyone went quiet. The silence was cold and clammy, and Junpei could feel it crawling across his back, around his throat. Again, he heard the ghosting moaning of... Again, he heard the ghosting moaning noise. I feel like that should be ghostly moaning. And moments later, a person who looked more ghost than human appeared. It was Clover. She looked at the floor as she spoke, and her voice was a cold monotone. I think Zero is one of us. Every human body in the room froze. The only sound was the muffled rustling of breath. Eyes darted from face to face. One of those faces was the face of their jailer. But who? Junpei? Junpei said, well, that's possible. That's crazy. I'm gonna go with crazy just because that sounds like a typical answer to give. And plus, I don't like the fact of it pointing to one of the people who are left. I'm obviously least connected to Lotus and Santa, but I kind of like Seven. And then Clover, why would she kill her brother? And Ace, I love Ace. So the only logical explanations for me would be is that it's either Lotus, Santa, or June, because I don't really care for June that much either, even though she's like the love interest, but I don't want it to be Ace. So I'm gonna be like, that's crazy, girl, you cray cray. That's crazy. Isn't this ship going to sink in a few hours? If Zero was here with us, he'd be putting himself in danger. Why the hell would he do something like that? There's no motive. Clover looked up at Junpei and her face fell. You don't believe me. Her eyes were so pitiful. The moment Junpei met them, he felt his heart tighten. He didn't think what he said was wrong. But perhaps the way he said it had been. He'd been too insensitive. Clover had just lost her brother. His death would have been bad enough, but she'd also seen the blasted wreck of his body. Junpei barely knew him, and the sight had been enough to make him sick. What Clover had felt, he couldn't begin to imagine. In the mental state she must have been in, it was understandable that she would look at those around her with suspicion. She felt everyone was against her. The least Junpei could have done was try to understand what she was feeling. He felt ashamed of what he'd said. I'm just making all kinds of poor decisions, man. Perhaps he thought I should apologize. But before that apology could begin, Clover, I understand what you're feeling. You don't feel that you can trust any of us. Ace had beaten Junpei to the punch. As he spoke to Clover, his face was calm and friendly. But you have to understand, the more we distrust one another, the further we fall into our true foe's trap. Zero was the one who did those horrible things to your brother. Do you want to let yourself be manipulated by someone who would do such a horrible thing? Clover didn't answer. She didn't even look at Ace. The whole time her eyes were on Junpei. He could feel Clover's eyes burrowing into him. They were the color of a deep winter lake. Junpei saw no suspicion in them, only sadness. Then, in that horrible silence, they heard a bell begin to ring. It was the clock at the central staircase. 3 in the morning. That means we have 3 hours left. Then we need to move now. 7, Clover. I know how you feel, but you do understand that right now it's important we trust one another, don't you? 7 and Clover remained silent. Their eyes were looking at something somewhere else, very far away. We must go. We have very little time left. Ace's words put their feet to moving. They all knew where they were going. Their next destination was Mercury. It sat bolted to the wall near the stairs that led to the casino and the kitchen, between the two elevators. The Mercury card reader. Junpei stood in front of it with the Mercury card. Seven had given him the card. I found it when we were checking out the shower room. At least that's what he'd said. Junpei slid the card through the reader. The light on the reader turned green and made a tiny electronic noise. Now they were ready. Junpei and Jun had been chosen as the investigators. The reasoning behind that they had been to E deck before, and no one else had. As before, Junpei sent the elevator ahead to make sure the floor they were headed to wasn't flooded. As before, the elevator returned as dry as when it left. Once it had been checked for water, Junpei and Jun stepped into the elevator. There were only two floor buttons they could push. The C and bottom buttons. The rest were destroyed or did nothing when pushed. Junpei hit the bottom button. The door closed. Slowly, they began to move downward. Sometime later, Junpei and Jun stepped off the elevator and onto the bottom deck. They stepped off and saw that the hallway to their right ended somewhere between 20 and 25 feet from them. The hallway in front of them was a dead end, but not a regular dead end. This is a numbered door. This is the eighth one we found. There were two numbered doors on B deck near the central staircase. They were doors 4 and 5. There were 3 more numbered doors in the large hospital room. 3, 7, and 8. Junpei and Jun had found another door on E deck, and Lotus and Santa had found a 7th on A deck. There was a 6 on the door on E deck, and a 1 on the door on A deck. 4, 5, 3, 7, 8, 6, 1. And now door 2 stood in front of Junpei. There was only one thing it meant. Do you think the next door we find? Yeah, I think so. The next one's gonna be door 9. Despite himself, Junpei felt excited. There was something about that excitement that frightened him as well. He did his best to put it from his mind and headed back to C deck with Jun. Alright, let's open these up. The pieces of paper they folded up lay on the ground next to Junpei's legs. There were 7 of them, all told. They were written on paper pulled from Junpei's notebook, and each one bore a code name and a door. Why had they decided to vote that way? They decided it wasn't fair to simply ask everyone at once. That would allow people to force others to go through certain doors. Well, that wasn't the only reason. Junpei had proposed the voting system, and he had a plan. It wasn't a plan he wanted anyone catching wind of, however, so he did his best to act calm as he began to open and read the pieces of paper. The first one read, Ace requests door 1. Yes, I do. Would you like me to explain why? No, we don't have time for that. Sorry. Let's keep going. He opened the second one. Next is Santa. He wants door 6. Yeah, that's what I wrote. Junpei continued with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th pieces of paper. Clover wants 1, Lotus wants 2, and 7 wants 2. Wait a minute. There's no way I'm going anywhere with that elephant man. No. There'd be no point to the voting if we let people change their choices because of stuff like that. But just give it up, Lotus. It's not like I want to hang out with some exhibitionist grandma. I'm not an exhibitionist. I'm wearing clothes. Barely. So? Last I checked, that's not a crime. Maybe, but what about common decency? Nobody wants to have to look. Nobody wants to have to look at a chick who looks like a half-naked raisin. I'm going to kill you! Lotus's hair flared out like a mane of angry lion, and she roared with a voice that shook the walls. With some difficulty, Ace managed to restrain her. Junpei, read the rest. Alright. Junpei tore his eyes away and looked down at the 6th piece of paper. He opened it. June wants door 6. Yes. I don't really have a reason, I just feel like it. All of the papers save Junpei's had been read. He did some quick calculations in his head. People who requested door 1, Ace and Clover. This was the door on A deck, near the central staircase. People who requested door 2, 7 and Lotus. This was the door on the bottom deck, and could be reached by taking the elevator to the bottom of this ship. People who requested door 6, Santa and June. This was the door on E deck, and could be reached by taking the elevator near the central staircase down. It took him less than a second to run the numbers. He opened the 7th piece of paper and spoke. Okay, last one is mine. I want to go through... Oh, jeez. Oh, man, what were the... Oh, man. Okay, I should have been paying more attention. Okay, Ace is 1. Lotus 7. Santa's 4. 7 is 7. No, wait. Lotus is 8? Or is she 6? 7 is 7. I can't remember what June is, or myself. I know Snake was 2. Clover's 4. Oh man. Okay. Ace is 1, Clover's 4. They want to go through... So that would equal 5. So they want to go through... That wouldn't work. Go through door 2, 7. I'm gonna say Lotus is 8. Because I can't remember. So 7 and 8 equal 15. 1 and 5 equals 6, so that wouldn't work. Unless that was the... Oh wait, no, I think theirs would work. Okay, so door number 2. I think Santa's 3. And then make her... I'm gonna say door number 2. I'm gonna say door number 2. Because I don't want Santa and June left alone. Because I don't think theirs would work. And then... But neither would door number 1 though. Door number 6 would work, I think. If I'm right about Lotus's number. Which I'm probably not. I'm gonna say door number 2. I'm probably making a bad mistake. My choice is door number 2. Santa was unconvinced. Hey, wait a minute there. You cheating? Cheating? I'm asking if you changed your number after you heard what doors we wanted. How could I do that? I wrote it down on the paper earlier. Let me see that. Junpei shrugged and handed it to him. Santa examined it furiously. The others peered at it as well. As they did, Junpei quickly slipped the piece of paper he'd been hiding in his pocket. Although he'd never know it now, Santa had been justified in his suspicion. Junpei had switched papers. Ooh! He had prepared 3 pieces of paper for doors 1, 2, and 6, and put the papers with door 6 on it into the pot. He put a small mark on it so that he would know which one was his. He kept the 1 paper hidden to the left of his hand and the 2 paper hidden in his right, and then just made sure he didn't read his paper until the end. The rest was easy. If he wanted to go into door 1, he'd use his left hand, and his right hand if he wanted to go to door 2. Of course, if he wanted door 6, that would be simple. All he needed to do was switch nothing and say 6 had been what he had wanted all along. Well, what does it say? He fought the urge to smirk. You got lucky. Santa snorted and tossed the paper aside, frustrated. Alright, so we know who's going through door 2. It was me, Lotus, and Junpei. Oh no! No! It's not what I wanted! It was 20, 3-0, the other 2 teams. The problem's the other 2 teams. June and I want door 6. Clover and I chose door 1. That's not good. We can't open either doors with only 2 people. Everyone was silent. Then suddenly Clover spoke, her face blank and cold. Why don't Santa and June go into door 1? Oh, with Ace. Wait, with Ace. I'm okay with Ace. They looked at one another. 3, 6, and 1. Okay, so Santa was 3 and she was 6. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. Finally, Ace spoke. Then what will you do, Clover? I'll be waiting at the stairs. You guys are coming back here, right? That's what 7 was saying, wasn't it? That had been what 7 had said. Till we find that 9 door, 0 ain't gonna split us up. We might get separated for a little while, but we'll see each other again. Otherwise, we can't open door 9. That's how the nonary game works. I'm sorry, but I just want to be by myself for a while. You understand, right? There was no emotion on her face, but it was drawn and pale, and her eyes were red. No one had the heart to contradict her. The room grew very quiet. Silence drifted down over everything like a blanket of fresh snow. It was Santa who finally spoke. Alright, I'm gonna go through door 1. That alright with you, June? June said nothing, she simply nodded. And just like that, their paths were set. It meant that Junpei would be away from June for a time, but it had been his choice, and he would have to make his peace with it. I didn't want to go with Seven and Lotus though. I messed up. Seven had said they'd all see one another again, and Junpei believed him.